Joining us, East Bay Congressman Mark DeSaulnier. We're going to take a look back as well as forward right now on one of the biggest questions confronting America. It's called the balance of power, that balance that we had between the courts, the Congress and the president. It seems to me that in the last years, that power balance has shifted to where it's the president that seems to have the upper hand.
Well, this has been, I would say, a historical trend since the evolution of TV and Jack Kennedy. There's been more and more power put in the presidencies. That's not what James Madison wanted. Article 1 created the Congress, and the House of Representatives is supposed to be the lead agency of three co-equal branches.
But yes, since the age of Kennedy and television, the president has become more and more powerful. And then you wind up with Donald Trump and everybody's eyes bug out. But the fact is, he is the product, in some ways, of what has been going on for decades in Washington.
Well, he's a product of a lot of things, if you ask me. But this is a tension that the founders were worried about between these branches.
And Nancy Pelosi finds herself as a Speaker of a House that is divided, a party that is divided, and a Senate that is in the hands of the others. Where does that put her?
Well, we're going through one of the ugly periods of this country. It's not the first time that Congress was not functioning. I think Nancy Pelosi, I think history will show that she was a providential figure in our history. She's very good at what she does. But this is a struggle. We've got a country that's very divided.
And it seems like the two balances of power now is the presidency on one hand, whether it's Donald Trump or Barack Obama, with the executive orders saying, I'm going to do this, whether Congress wants to or not. And then the only counter to that is the Supreme Court or the court system. Everything now seems to go from the president's office to the courts.
Right.
And Congress, as far as we can see, is either just fighting with each other or running for president.
Yeah, and the courts have been a 40-year, very deliberative process from the Federalist Society and the Koch brothers to make sure that they get activist conservative judges on there. So this is one of those periods in our history, and we've been through this before, as you've said, where the country is very divided, and it's displaying itself in all of our governing institutions.
So who has the most power? Is it the Supreme Court now? Is it the president? Or Congress doesn't seem to have it?
It's a struggle. And again, we've been through this before, but I think this is particularly bad because of how the country is split, because of the makeup of the Senate. Wyoming gets 2 U.S. senators for 600,000 people. California gets 2 for 40 million. So all of these things are structural, but they're also...
Well, there's another thing we have to add in there, I think, is that Congress abrogated its responsibilities? It began, I'm going to take you back to the first Iraq War and the second Iraq War, where they basically said, the president, you get the power to do what you're going to do, and if there's a great parade at the end, we'll cheer, and if there's not, we'll be able to criticize. But they sort of stepped back.
No, I absolutely agree. And I'm a co-author of a Barbara Lee bill that would stop that. So after 9/11, the Congress passed the War Powers Act to give the president much broader...
So he now has much more power than before.
Yes, because Congress gave him, literally in policy, the War Powers Act after 9/11.
Why has Congress been willing to abrogate its power, not only on this, but on a host of issues?
I would say Newt Gingrich was sort of the threshold when he became Speaker, and after years of being in the minority, the Republicans started to assert themselves in Congress, and part of that was ceding authority to the administration, but also just minimizing government. That was part of their plan. So
part of their plan, and also people wanted to get reelected, or...
Yeah, that's a strange phenomenon. Politicians want to get reelected. But that's part of what's wrong.
But you know, wait a minute. I could make the argument that politicians wanting to get reelected is what's right, because that's what they're supposed to do.
Yep.
You know, otherwise they don't answer to anybody, and I wind up with an imperial presidency and a Supreme Court that's appointed for life.
But there are times in the country's history where the elected officials, members of Congress, are supposed to put the good of the country ahead of their own personal career. And when they do that, more often than not, if they can explain it to their constituents, they get reelected and are empowered. That's what we need right now.
Okay. Congratulations, America. We made it through another year. I guess July 4th is as good a birthday celebration as any, and we've made it. We've made it. The republic has lasted. But my question to you, Congressman Mark DeSaulnier, was this the republic that the founders envisioned?
Yes and no. I mean, they wouldn't have known that you and I would be sitting here with TV, social media, so that part nobody could have obviously then. But I would argue that our founding documents created this country in a way that we are aspiring. Every day is get up and try to do the best you can and improve the country.
Because out there we hear that we have never been more divided, we've never been more of a mess. This was not the republic that the founders envisioned. Is that accurate?
No. We had a civil war in this country. That's when we were most divided.
So we constantly sort of America wakes up with a sort of amnesia where everything is what is ever happening right now and today. And we look back on these past times with sort of a golden eye. I find it interesting that everybody used to talk about, there were times when people got together and Congress had bipartisan and worked together. But the minute you mention working together now, everybody screams at you saying, how could you possibly be working with those people?
Yeah, some of that is made worse, and we know this now by social media and 24/7 news, not this kind of conversation, because you make money off of getting people upset, and it's more sophisticated. There's a lot of bipartisan work. I've had 30 amendments and bills passed when the Republicans were in charge because we work, but those are on things that never get into the news.
And that's interesting because the news does play up the splits.
Yep.
In other words, even if something passes, it's the split that makes it. We had a tremendous criminal justice reform under Trump.
Yep.
It doesn't get mentioned. If you have an infrastructure bill, it doesn't get mentioned. But in past administrations, the same thing. Agreement doesn't sell.
Well, we haven't had an infrastructure bill, and we won't because the Republicans will not identify a revenue source. But on justice reform, we did that in California. There was actually an agreement on evidence-based research that shows that if you do certain things, diversion and work with people when they first get in trouble, particularly with drugs, that's cheaper, more effective, and you lower your recidivism rate. So that was an example where the far right actually did what they, in my view, should do, is let's do evidence-based research and you see improvements.
When we see publicly, let's be frank, in the Democratic Party, if you so much as talk to a Republican, you can be branded as a traitor. Is that how it is privately in Washington as well?
Not for myself. I mean, you've got 435 members of the House, 100 members of the Senate. So when you have 535 people, you're going to have different relationships. For myself, I understand that the country's different. I have very strongly felt opinions about what my colleagues do, but I work with them.
If you were to look back at the founding members, and they were men because that's how it was then, and the debates they had, and there was partisanship. It was raw, bare-knuckle partisanship.
Jefferson and Adams.
You used to have riots rather than were regular. People would be fighting each other. What do you think they would be most dismayed at today's state of government?
Well, I think people need to be reminded on the 4th of July, we had Alexander Hamilton and Aaron Burr in a shootout. One of them got killed. The other one was Vice President of the United States and was accused of being a traitor and had to run. We had Adams and Jefferson, which is sort of the example of a relationship that worked, didn't work, and then worked towards the end of their lives. So this is what America's about to me. It's not, we got here, everything's perfect, and let's save it. It's a constant get up every day and try to make, as Lincoln said, a more perfect union.
With people.
With people.
And people are always the problem.
People are both the aspiration and the desperation.
Aspiration and desperation. Those things are the yin and yang of American politics, plus ambition thrown in there, right in the center.
No.
Oh, come on. Come on.
I just want to be here with you.
Sometimes limited ambition.
Right.
Okay, Congressman DeSaulnier, thank you for joining us this morning.